For my presentation is combating desertification in sub-Saharan Africa. This is a really global phenomenon, but it particularly has potent side effects in sub-Saharan Africa. And so what is desertification? Well, essentially it's the process by which land becomes less biologically active. So that can mean that there is less plant life growing, less animals moving into the area. That plant life, that could be, it's harder to grow plants for humans in terms of agriculture, but also just naturally occurring vegetation. And so one of the main causes for this, especially in Africa, is overgrazing and deforestation. And those two kind of are linked hand in hand because a lot of times areas are deforested so that they can then become pastures for grazing animals. And so the reason that these are so bad is because, well, deforestation is obviously just removing trees and vegetation, which is obviously going to make the land like less biologically active. Um, Overgrazing, on the other hand, that's going to lead to soil compaction, having a lot of animals pounding on the soil, which makes it hard for new plants to develop root systems. And also, the other effect is that when you have a lot of animals coming over, way too many for a small area, you'll get them just eating the grasses down to the very bottom to the roots. And that is going to be very hard for plants to recover from. So that can lead to having plants having a hard time growing. Another effect thing that can cause desertification is salinization. And so this is when the soil essentially becomes more salty, and the leading cause of this is irrigation. And so what happens is when you bring in water, it's going to have things dissolved in it, and as that water sits and evaporates, it'll actually leave behind those solutes, and it can create a salty residue that you can actually see in this picture, that white crust in figure 1. And obviously, most plants are not well adapted to deal with salt in the soil, so that's going to harm biological activity. Another cause for this is climate change, and this is kind of a vicious loop because what you'll see is with climate change there'll be higher average temperatures and more harsh storm events that are going to be damaging the forests and the trees and the plants. And so obviously that's going to be make it harsher conditions for plants to grow in. But then also as these plants start to die off, they're not going to be doing their job of converting CO2 into oxygen. So it creates this cycling motion where climate change can exacerbate desertification, but desertification can also exacerbate climate change by preventing that because it stops that draw of CO2 from the atmosphere. And so who does desertification affect? Well, the studies have shown it affects primarily women and children in Africa. The children, because obviously everyone needs good nutrients, good food, good nutrition, but as it becomes harder to grow things and harder to grow nutritious food, the children and developing people are especially harmed by that because they just need more nutrients. Um, and the women, because desertification can lead to farther treks to find water and firewood and food and whatnot. And just because of the way the society is organized, that burden often gets shifted onto the women. So it's physically more draining on them and more damaging to them. And so, what is being done to prevent this or to remedy this? The Great Green Wall Initiative is an initiative that's designed to kind of replant and reteach. So you can see in figure 3, there's actually a tree nursery there. And that's just basically, I mean, it's a pretty simple idea. Just keep replanting and try to reclaim this land that's been kind of lost. And so, in addition to that, they just want to share farming ideas and techniques that are going to help keep the soil healthy and prevent erosion and other things like that, like terracing and planting windbreaks. Those are just some ideas that they kind of help to try to share and educate. And then another different angle is kind of be taking a look at this is microbial research and the idea that perhaps we could genetically engineer some of these soil microbes to make just make the soil healthier and more productive because that's going to obviously allow more plant life, which in turn brings in more animals and whatnot. Um, and so far, obviously, this is very theoretical in early stages, but there was just some modeling done with different equations and math essentially, and the models were very promising that if these genetically engineered microbes behave in the way that the models predict, it could be very beneficial. And so obviously, there's a lot to look at here with ethics and all sorts of different things, and just to make sure that this is safe and will be an effective procedure, but I think it's a very interesting idea, and it's very comforting to know that people are looking at this.